Welcome to the You Need More Money podcast. I'm your host, Matt Manero, where I come to you every week for my
I was doing that, I was also freelancing and building up contacts in the world of journalism. So when I finished law school, I applied to, I was talking to people I'd been freelancing for at Newsweek. And lucky for me, in April or May of 1985, they hired me. They hired me to work at a side venture of Newsweek called Newsweek on Campus. It was a part of the magazine that was aimed at college students, and I had been a college student. I had been a campus stringer for them. I'd written stories for this college, contributed to stories for the college edition. And so when I told them that I was thinking of moving up to New York and living anyway, they hired me. And so that was my entry into the world of actual for pay, big time journalism. And things went on from there. From Newsweek on Campus, I moved into Newsweek after about a year. And then after about 8 years at Newsweek, I got a call from folks over at the Washington Post and applied for a job there. And ended up at the Washington Post from 93 until 2000, when I started talking with the people at the New York Times. And I got a chance to go to the Times, and who would even ask, it made perfect sense to me. And so I came over, and I've been here ever since. It's more than 17 years now.
But your genre of journalism was not always financial based, right? That was not your wheelhouse or your niche. Is that fair to say?
Well, it was the first job. Once I got into Maine Newsweek, I was hired for the business section of Newsweek. So the first work I did in journalism was business journalism. Once I got into Newsweek proper. But from there, I moved to all kinds of things, because it seemed to me that it was a better thing to do the jobs that were needed than the jobs that I charted out for myself. I don't think that it'd be possible for me to have charted a career and made predictions about where I was going to go. But I was always able to see opportunity in this or that job that had come open and go for that. And so that has led me to write about technology, business, space. I covered the space program for the New York Times for 6 years. I covered the tobacco wars at the Washington Post. Most of the time I've been in journalism, I've been a science reporter, but I've also covered the law, because you got the law degree, why not? And tons of other issues and topics. Just because if you're in a big room like the New York Times, there's a lot of need. Breaking news, disasters. I've been through 3 hurricanes for the Times. So you find your niche, and then you go do things.
I'm sure, not being a highly educated guy myself, I'm sure there's quotes from poets or wonderful writers who have talked about my life journey, but I believe it all comes down to these few moments of guts in which we are required to do the most difficult thing, which is uphold character and honor and decency and fairness. And I relish those moments. I actually think those are great qualities of a world-class leader, and I've tried to become one in my business particularly. But you had to bridge that in writing this book because of the amount of transparency required to make the book authentic enough to make it meaningful to it. It's not, for me, and I know this is the same in your opinion of the way you wrote the book, it's not good enough to just throw up on the reader about why they're behind and what, where they screwed up. And then here are 2 or 3 tidbits that are out there, which is, don't buy Starbucks and save $3 a day. And imagine what happens over 30 years. Well, that's not my version of my book, and it's not your version of your book either. But how did you come to this moment, this pivotal moment that said, in order for me to pull this book off transparently and with authenticity, I got to tell my story of it? There had to be some incredible difficulty for you talking to your wife about, talking to your friends about. How many of your friends had no idea you were in the spot that you were in, John?
Well, that's, I jump into these things thinking, well, I'll be able to tell these stories, and I'll do it the way I always do it, which is to do my research. And if the research is on me, that's fine. And I sort of get in a zone where I'm just doing the work. And then I finished it and turned it in, and I had people, like colleagues who are really big, highly placed business reporters and other journalists say, wow, I always thought you were competent. And so
You were the guy that had it all together, John.
Exactly. And I realized, well, I really did tell people a lot of stuff, didn't I?
Yeah.
And I had. I mean, everything I did was intentional. I felt that these were helpful stories and stories worth telling. I told my wife that I wanted to do it this way, and she wanted to make sure that I didn't get anything wrong. So we talked about that. But she didn't talk about revealing our problems. I mean, look, we lost an apartment. We gave up an apartment in foreclosure. Our first home that we bought was an apartment in New York City. And in the 1990s, the water went out and we were stuck. And
how much would that apartment be worth today?
Well, I'm assuming that I checked it. I've checked various times.
Of course, we must stab ourselves. Of course, we have to relive our pain.
Exactly. And I've seen it up at around $1 million, and I've seen it in the 700s. We bought it for 134.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So if we'd held on to it, we'd have made a ton of money, but it was bleeding us to death with the monthly mortgage and maintenance payments. It was just killing us.
Yeah.
And we had gotten a job in Washington, D.C. That's the Washington Post job. And while the Post was able to help me for the first 9 months with a supplement to help me get through and sell the apartment turned out to be unsellable because of the quirks of New York real estate, that if you own a co-op and the building itself hasn't converted to a sufficient extent, you've got more renters than co-op owners. And if the market is poor, then no bank will give a new mortgage. No bank will let anybody assume a mortgage. So the apartment is just locked up. And so we tried to be landlords, but that went very badly for us too. And ultimately, I mean, I frankly thought, and many family members thought, it was time to file for bankruptcy.
Yeah,
we were that close, but we found a bankruptcy lawyer who convinced me that we didn't have to go that far.
Well, that's unusual.
That we could give up the apartment and that we could give up the apartment and do fine because I still had income. Mm-hmm. We just had this one crushing debt that we needed to get away from, and so. And so this lawyer, who was terrific, guided me through it. But I mean, that was a real low point for us.
But the premise of your book too, John, is that I call it in my book false positive. It's this thought process that we are actually doing better than we really are. And most people think that financial problems happen to people who are broke and they're tapped. And the reality is it's this next movement out of broke. In my book, I call it the accumulation mode, where once the bills don't come on pink slips anymore and we actually can buy certain things and we can maybe do the nice Disney World trip, that extends false positive for millions, more like tens of millions of Americans who are living in this mindset that things are okay, but they are not squirreling away anything for the future. And it's terrifying, and it's epidemic proportions in America. And I think the reason for that, I'd love your opinion on it, but I think the reason for it is most people have no concept of how much they actually need in the long term anymore. We are living in this consumption-based environment, and we are putting off the future for our happiness today. What is your opinion of that?
Well, I think you're absolutely right in identifying what is really a basic flaw of human nature, that we're very bad at planning. We see what's directly in front of us. We see the bear, we run from the bear. But what we don't see is something that's 10 years away. We don't eat the way we should. We don't prepare for climate change. We're not trying to deal with climate change as a culture. We're not trying to, and of course, climate change is what I cover for a living now. So I think about this a lot, but it's all tied in. I mean, we eat poorly. We don't exercise. These are all things that require you to take a long view and squeeze a little today in hopes of doing better tomorrow. And this is just a flaw of human nature. In the corporate world, it's trying to make the quarter instead of thinking of the long-term health of your company. But it all comes down to the same unwillingness, that same lack of an ability to see forward, farther than the bear, farther than what bear might be in front of you. And so that flaw in our human nature touches all kinds of things. I just happen to write about the way it touches us on money. And, it's also about the fact that money as a specific topic is very frightening to people. They just don't like to think about it. They don't like to talk about it. It breaks up marriages in the same way that infidelity breaks up marriages. It becomes a taboo topic that people have a terrible time discussing.
Yeah, they do. Friends do too. We lie to each other. We lie to our buddies. We lie to our family. I lied to my spouse about it for many years. I lied to all my employees about it, about how poorly the business was actually doing. Gosh, I'm supposed to be this young, high-flying entrepreneur, and 10 years into the business, I'm still busted broke, and I'm trying to make people think that I'm not. And the sad part is that so many people live their entire lives like that.
Well, it's true. And to get back to the point you made a few minutes ago, when we start doing better, that's when the real trouble can start, because we can spend a little more. It's very easy to spend a lot more. And instead of change spilling out of your pocket, you're spending big and it's not even extravagant trips. It's the accumulation of things that I don't worry about whether I need to buy this now. So, maybe those theater tickets would be a good idea just because we want to go. And we've been squeezed for so long. Well, you want to get squeezed again, that kind of spending will put you there.
Yeah, I think perhaps a primary difference, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think a primary difference between our two books is that my book is about, I'm not looking to reduce spending. I'm looking to teach people on how to earn more and to bring more value to the situation that they're in. I think there's just massive deficit. I was just talking to someone about it in my office before this podcast, where she's looking for a raise. And I said to her, I want to create the opportunity for you to get this raise. Nothing would make me more happy to produce this for you, but here are the 4 things you have to do that you're not doing, right? And I went through the 4 things for her. And it was literally like she just didn't see it. And I said, it's fine for you to come into my office with an open door policy and ask for anything you want. But you must understand that if there isn't ROI connected to it, it will never happen. And ROI is, for me, what it all is based upon. Whether we are employees or employers, ROI drives the ability to fix the problem far greater than saving on a Starbucks. So when you made the decision, John, to take this year that you put your financial life in order, would you please tell the audience, what was the first step you took to get a handle, to rein in the bear again?
Well, the very first thing I did was to confront the thing that I'd been putting off for a very, very long time, for years and years, which was getting a look at what my retirement looked like. I was in my late 50s, and I had luckily worked for companies all my career that have defined benefit pensions. The pensions are there. I have access to, I've got Social Security, but also I had a 401k that I'd started making contributions to when I was in my 20s, when I got that first job at Newsweek. So here I am with the 3 legs of the stool of retirement, as they say.
You're talking pension, 401k, and Social Security?
Right, or pension, IRA, and Social Security, but your retirement savings, Social Security, and whatever your job provides. Now, too many people today don't have that pension anymore. That's a benefit that's gone out of the window for a lot of people. But some of us have been lucky enough to work at big companies that still provide that. So that's what I had, but I didn't know where it was going to take me. That when I retired, I didn't know whether that was enough money to live comfortably, to live poorly. I wasn't the kind of guy who even opened the Vanguard envelopes. I just didn't want to think about it. Mm. And so the first step for me was to get my brain around where we stood for retirement. And that started with one of those simple quizzes on the Vanguard website. And if you're at Fidelity, they've got them. And if you're not with anybody, you can still find these things online. And Vanguard said, well, this is a 45-minute quiz. Well, the first question took me 45 minutes to answer. These were not issues that I dealt with often.
Do you recall what the question was, John?
When do you plan to retire? And I had never thought about when I would retire. I was thinking about the fact that I work with people who work into their 70s, that my father was still working in his late 80s. But here was this question, and I was stumped, and I had to go online and look around for, well, when do people retire? I know this sounds stupid, but I didn't know, when do people retire? And
it's usually 65, John. Doesn't everybody know 65?
I mean, if I were an executive at my company, they would kick me out at 65.
Yeah.
But, and a lot of other companies would do the same, but that's not where I was. And as a writer, you sort of get to continue doing it until somebody tells you to go home. Look, I worked at the Washington Post. I worked with Shirley Povich, who was a sports writer, who continued to work into his 90s, and who filed his last column during the day, passed away that night. They, of course, published it the next day because his copy was always terrific. That's the way we want to go in the writing business.
Yeah.
Just take me out, boots up. Then that's how I want to go. So, but for the purposes of the exercise, I had to come up with a number. So, being the kind of guy I am, I did all my research, and at the end of it, I had a number that I'd like to work until 70, 72, somewhere in there, and I have a number to plug in. And I look up and I tell my wife, okay, that's question 1. And she said, that was 45 minutes.
She said, move over, let me take it.
Well, no, she was perfectly happy to let me take the wheel on this one. She was not excited about the exercise, but she did want to know where we stood. And so, we worked through it all. I got my pension stuff. I got her Social Security stuff. Bit by bit, we pieced it all together. I mean, look, these things have questions that are horrifying. How long do you think you'll live? Yeah. Is one of the questions. Well, that's an essential question because you got to know if the assets are going to be there, right? Except, how long am I going to live? I mean, that's a horrifying question. But again, you sort of look at your parents, you look at your grandparents, you look at, again, that my dad was working into the age of 90. You say, well, maybe I've got some time. And barring getting hit by a bus during my morning run, maybe I can do okay. And so over the course of a week, I gathered together all the numbers. I plugged it all in. I submitted it all to Vanguard, and they sent me back a report that said that we were on track to meet our goals.
Wow.
Which was great. But I didn't know, I didn't know. And of course, they said a few other things. They said, you're pretty heavy into stocks at this point in your life. You probably want to have more bonds. And by the way, there's some very nice Vanguard funds you could be looking at for that. You should be shifting around, and we don't charge you to shift around. All that advice was in there. But just seeing that, barring apocalyptic economic disaster, barring other problems, that if I keep putting in the money I'm putting in, we'll survive. We won't be rich. We won't be more comfortable than we are today, but we should be okay. And that was a tremendously liberating feeling.
Sure.
And so, so then with that under my belt, just like knocking out your debts, with that achievement under my belt, I wanted to plan the rest of it. I wanted to figure out the rest of it. Let's move on to the other things we haven't done yet, which included, for a guy in his late 50s, getting a will, which I didn't have yet, even though we had 3 kids. I mean, that's nuts, but we finally did that too.
Well, that's a very interesting twist, John, because you're extremely fortunate that you were able to get the result you got, because most people, when they do it, especially at the age that you were doing it, they are woefully behind. And
well, that's exactly right.
And that's I mean, you reference it as liberating. Most people, it's debilitating when they do it. And they say, now what am I supposed to do? And they go into absolute panic mode. And the sad part is, in my research for my book, is most people just give up. And they just say, not in my lifetime. I missed it. I blew it. And my book explains to people how that is just that defeatist attitude is just completely unacceptable when it comes to money, because we can fix our money situation with a pretty simple roadmap. There are lots of ways to make up the gap.
Yes, and some of it involves sacrifice. But look at this question. Look at one of the questions in the Vanguard questionnaire. How long do I expect to live? Well, if I expect to live into my 80s, at least, potentially into my 90s, then I'd better be putting money away now. I'd better be putting more money away now. This is the time to be doing it. And so I, in fact, ended up adding more to my 401k and upping that some, because I realized that I needed to be more comfortable. I talked to experts in the financial world for the book and said, what about the people who are in their 50s and really have not adequately put it aside? And Burton Malkiel said, well, you do it now. Mm-hmm. You do it now, because the best way to make sure that you'll have nothing is to do nothing.
Yeah. But, well, I mean, the math is pretty straightforward on it. 21 years at a 6% rate of return, starting with $2,000 and simply adding $2,000 a month for 21 years ends up being $1 million. So if a guy does it in his 30s or in his 40s or in his 50s, $1 million is still a very achievable number based on that math problem. It actually works.
That's exactly right. And you can use the sliders on this. If you're a little behind, you can put in more if you have the ability to do it. And what I tell people to do in starting is first start early. Start in your 20s if you possibly can, and build that IRA or 401k, depending on what your situation is. And you can start it with a 1% of your income contribution. But then what you do is you set it to automatically up by another percentage point the next year, and to automatically jump every year in this small increment that, unless you're really squeezed, you're not going to feel, and to let that build up happen over time. That's the way to ensure for your future without feeling a terrible bite.
Well, compound interest was the saving grace for you and your wife, though, because you had started early. That was one of the reasons that you were able to actually even be on a version of autopilot that worked out for you. Is that fair to say?
I would say that compound interest, but also a generally rising stock market.
Yeah.
That yes, we took a hit in the mid 2000s. Yes, there have been recessions and the stock market has dipped, but over time the market tends to rise. And we were pretty heavily into these low cost, low fee index funds that reflected the market. And so we just sort of gradually rose with all the other boats.
But John, what else did you do to put your financial life in order? I mean, we dotted the I's and crossed the T's by getting the will. We got transparent. We got open. We searched for the truth, and we found out where your existing situation was. You got a very good dose of information where so many people go the opposite direction. Keep going, if you don't mind. Expand on the other aspects of getting your financial life in order for that.
Of course. Well, first of all, I did the reading. All the things that I had avoided learning about, not just about my personal finance, but about what you need to know about money and about retirement. I went through and read some of the financial guides that I had put aside. Beyond that, I got, along with the will, I got medical directives. I looked at my life insurance. I looked at my health insurance. I was a little worried that if I left my job, I would be put in a position of having to get a new life insurance policy, and that in my 60s that was going to be a pretty expensive proposition. So I buckled down and went through the process of getting a life insurance policy, getting the physical, answering the million questions that these people ask, and then locking in a rate for 10 years. Mm-hmm. So that I would be covered whatever happened with my job. Similarly, I looked through the health insurance to see whether we were adequately covered, and things like that. That sort of checkup, all part of getting things tidied up. Checked all our expenses. Looked at the places that money was leaking out. Yeah, like you, I'm not really impressed with the idea that if you don't drink the Starbucks, you'll be rich. You won't.
You won't.
But you do have to look at what money you're spending and whether all of it, do you need Netflix and Hulu and iTunes and Spotify? How many subscriptions are going to just leak out of your bank account every month? And it just forces you to think about the money you're spending and make choices, pay down debts that you can pay, and be a little more, to use the term, a little more mindful about what you do with your money and where it goes.
I think these our books are quite different, and I think that's very interesting for the audience to know that, because
you're an entrepreneur. You have built a business and you are supporting people, employees. It's a very different position, but what you're doing is fantastically important.
Yeah, and what you've done in the book is fantastically important, because I don't do any of this in my book. I don't go through any of this checklist at all, which I think is so vital for most people. I mean, mine is basically a book that says, take the time to figure out your mission statement, your core values, your lifestyle by design. What is it? What is this visualization that you see for yourself? And then force money to create it. And unfortunately, I think so many people spend so much time giving up that first piece of my suggestion, my journey, my roadmap, because they don't know how to tackle the second piece. And the second piece is actually pretty easy to tackle. I mean, I look at money as like an old dog. It just wants to roll over and be petted. But most people are afraid to even talk to it or touch it or anything. Money is really very simple to master. When we understand a few things. And one of those is, what do we want money to do in our lives? I've got friends that drive a truck 6 months out of the year and surf in Costa Rica 6 months out of the year. They live incredibly rich lifestyles, unbelievably rich lifestyles. It's exactly the way they want to do it. And it works out beautifully for them. Some people have to have private jets and stay at the Four Seasons everywhere they go. Whatever. I'm not judgmental on that. But what I do believe is that we have to have this vision for what is our life supposed to look like, and how do we make money a active component of it. Because if we don't, that time marches on, and that old saying of it, it just catches up to us, and it does. And it's nasty when it does.
That's right. And I'm not an entrepreneur. I make the money that I can make through my employer, and if I get lucky, through the books that I get to write. But in saying that, there's still a degree of choices that we all can make. I've been driving the same car for 10 years, and people laugh at the thing. It's a little tiny smart car from Germany that I paid $14,000 for. And I love the thing. It's a rattle trap. It's uncomfortable. It's loud, but it gets me where I'm going, and I'm absolutely in love with this terrible rust bucket of a car. At the same time, on the weekend, when I get ready to drop charcoal on the grill, I buy some pretty good steaks to do that. And so these are the choices. What's important? I don't care what I look like when I'm on my way to the train station, but when I burn a steak, I want it to be good.
Well, it's utilitarian, and it is your lifestyle by design. It is what John wants for himself. It's choices through focus, and that's the biggest problem. Most of us are literally just floating on this stream called life, and we are going where the current takes us. And when it comes to our money situation, that is probably the most disastrous way to be. We have to take control of our money.
I'm with you.
So I'm grateful that but John, I do, just as we close, I want to stay on the power of transparency for a minute, because, and I've never said this to anybody on the podcast before, but I lost a friend over this book, a friend of mine who I cite in the book as a person who won the game of money. Older gentleman, basically punted on our 20-year friendship because of the way I represented him in the book. Huh. And I was so upset about it, because it was actually, I thought I represented him like a hero, someone who played the game beautifully and won it. He didn't see it that way. So what other shrapnel has occurred from you writing the book?
Well, I'll tell you, I got an angry note from our youngest son.
Wow.
Because I pointed out in the book that we were that when we wrote the will, at the moment we wrote the will, he was having problems. He had been dealing with depression and anxiety, and had withdrawn from college, and he was home living with us. And so when we went to see the lawyer to write up the will, that was very much on our minds. And we told the lawyer, we think maybe we need a trust for him, and maybe administered by his sister, and that'll keep them in touch, and it'll make sure that there's some money being provided for him if we leave anything. I mean, you hope that it would last a longer time. Not because he's irresponsible. He's not. He doesn't have any of those problems. We just wanted it to stretch out. And the lawyer said, yeah, I've seen this before. It's a reasonable thing to do. I'll write it in. And we forgot to tell him, which is, you want to talk about transparency. There's your first mistake is, you tell him. So we didn't tell him. He finds out because I get an excerpt of the book in the New York Times about wills, and I get a text message from him that says, ahem. And there's this line underlined from the piece. And I go back and I say, I should have told you. He says, yes, you should have told me. But also, look, this trust is BS. I don't need this. And at that point, we're now a year and a half, 2 years after that moment, right? So I've turned in the book. I've rewritten the book. The book is now published. And I realized that's true. In the year since that happened, he had gotten a job, had been a terrific, dependable employee, had showed up every day, had gotten a good grip on the depression and anxiety issues that he was dealing with, and really seemed as steady a citizen as you could ever want. And so there's a little shrapnel there, but what it led to was my saying, when we see the lawyer again, we're going to take the trust out.
That's
and he
awesome.
said, good. He's okay.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, that's very telling on a number of things. What it tells me is, and the audience, is how long it takes to get a book published. Everybody thinks it's quick.
Oh man, don't even start me on this.
It's unbelievable. I mean, we're talking about, I have data points in there from 2014 and 2015. I mean, that's just how long it takes and it's so funny too, is I know you've experienced this on your other works, but your opinions change. Right? You don't always see it the same way that you did 2 years ago when you're going through it.
Life changes, and life changes you. All this stuff happens. The book, the turning in that draft of the book happened, and then there was a rewrite. Once I turned it in sort of mid to late 2017, and the editor said, okay, we'll have this out April 2018, which was a 5-month turnaround. And I said, you can't be serious. This was the fastest turnaround on a book, but still between the first draft and getting it published is a year and a half, well over a year. Yeah. And a lot of things can happen in that time.
Yeah. Just in disclosure, John and I share the same publisher in Penguin, and I found them to be incredible to work with, as I'm sure you have too. But the process of writing a book takes a long time. And, it's just the nuts and bolts of getting, I guess, graphics and typesetting and, all of the other things through it. But for me, as I hope it was. What did you say, John?
I said, and also for me, having, had the people at the publishers, I had an editor, Megan Newman, who was she's just brilliant. And she really helped shape the thing. She really understood what it needed to be better than I did myself. And then there's all these other people that work at a publisher, from copy editors through publicists, and it's just an enormous enterprise. And having that kind of talent behind you, it's unbeatable.
Yeah, it is. And a lot of people question, well, why did you go a publisher route versus a self-published route? And the end result is I did my first book was self-published, but there is something very beneficial about it. And it's exactly what you said. It's you're working with absolute pros who know how to deliver the best possible product from this piece of clay that you've sort of served up and given them. And for me, I served it up thinking it was on a silver platter, and they came back and said, yeah, we're going to make a few changes here. So I love working with, I love working with the best. Yeah, that's when you know they're good, right? That's exactly right. You know that they're not afraid to tell you that there's some work to be done still. Well, John, the book is called This Is the Year I Put My Financial Life in Order. I congratulate you for doing it and telling your story, because I believe that is the crux of it all. Do we get so blessed to have a point in our lives where we are required to have true transparency in all that we do? And I just relish those moments. I've only had a few in my life. My book is one of them, and I have a feeling yours was one of yours too.
Thank you so much.
It's been my pleasure. John Schwartz, the author of This Is the Year I Put My Financial Life in Order, same publisher as mine, therefore available on any channels, right, John? Amazon, Barnes & Noble, anywhere books are sold.
Bookstores. I see it in bookstores. That's a thrilling thing.
Isn't that cool?
But that's right. You can get it IndieBound, Barnes & Noble, .com, or, just all over.
Yeah. Congratulations, John. I wish you the best of luck. It's a pleasure to meet you today on the show.
Thanks, and same to you.
Thank you.